Hello, everyone. Thank you for making the time to come and see me. I'm Hejani. I am one of the product managers here at Google. I lead developer monetization on Google Play Console. Super excited to be here today and have an opportunity to share with all some of the innovative ways in which games and apps are evolving their monetization strategies on Play. By the end of the session, I'm hoping I have inspired you through your monetization journey. But if you're already an expert, hopefully you can learn a few new tricks to add to your toolbox. So today I'm covering basically three areas. I'm going to start covering the basics of designing your monetization strategy and what you have to think when you're building a mobile game. Second, we're going to look at some of the best practices on hybrid monetization seen and experienced by games that are currently available on Play. And then lastly, I'm going to share a few of the tools, particularly on the Play console, to help you reach your full game's potential. So let's start with designing your monetization strategy. Before we dive into it, I'm going to say that I'm only going to cover and focus on the Play monetization models. I'm not going to talk about ads. Hopefully you had a chance to catch up today to the other Google sessions, one of which talked about Google AdMob. There was also another session talk about cloud monetization, which I'm not going to cover. I'm going to primarily focus on in-app purchases subscriptions, because this is what an area where we have seen a lot of success through our developers. Before we start, I like to think about this framework, and this is a very simple framework that can help you guide your game design to growth. The first step to be able to do a really good monetization strategy is to actually understand the synergy between game design and successful monetization. You simply cannot monetize a game that no user wants to play, or one that's not effective at acquiring, engaging, and retaining its players. Once you have designed that core game loop, it will be easier to decide if you think you can better extract value upfront, in which case probably you're thinking about gating your features through a premium strategy, where the user is going to pay before they actually install and actually play the game. But if not, probably you're going to think about gating your features through in-app purchases, subscriptions, or battle passes and ads. Once you have decided what the monetization model should be, the next step is obviously looking at how you merchandise the game and the items you're trying to sell. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, be very clear about your goals and the KPIs you're trying to achieve. Measuring your KPIs is key to understand where you can adjust, and then you can start rinse and repeat. So let's focus a little bit more on the first step. We talked about how game design should influence your monetization strategy, and one of the best ways to understand how to perceive the synergy is to understand the relationship between engagement and the actual monetization model you're trying to use, and how that interacts with a user when they're actually playing your game. For premium games, engagement is not tied to monetization because the user has already paid for the game before they installed it, so they haven't really played it before. For titles that are using in-app purchases and ads, many engagement actions are directly linked to monetization, and progression in the game is really key. For a user to actually be able to progress in the game, they need to buy items, currency, or pay with their time by watching an ad. This is the most prevalent form of monetization for mobile games we see today. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how that relates to the other monetization forms a little bit later on this presentation. Now, for subscriptions and battle passes, I think this is an area where we've seen extreme growth. And I'll show you on the next slide a little bit more in terms of what this means for revenue. But for those, key engagement actions are going to be the ones that tie to specific revenue actions. And when you think about subscriptions, you can think about two very broad cohorts of users. First, you have your early or free users. These are people that you have enticed to experience your game before they actually bought anything from you. And for them, the key to engagement is to aim for subscriber conversion. So you're trying to actually ensure these players have some time before they actually convert, so actually experience the gameplay, get excited about it, and then become a subscriber or buy a battle pass later on. And you also have your subscribers. So For them, they already seen the game, they already subscribed, they have seen the value. But what you need to do for them is to make sure that all of the engagement actions are continuing to provide and sustain that value that they saw before they actually subscribed. So all of the engagement actions here are really aiming to renew. And although subscribers are actually quite similar to your earlier, your free users, you should expect, and we see this consistently with games in our platform, that subscribers, they actually have more sustained or increasing engagement metrics throughout the subscription duration. This creates a place where throughout the subscription, you also have good engagement from the player, and this will likely lead to either a renew or a subsequent purchase or an AEP. Before we talk a little bit more about best practices in subscriptions and battle passes, I wanted to share this chart that shows the value of revenue subscription, game subscription revenue on the Play platform from 2017 to 2023. Although we have seen after the pandemic that there was slightly decline in subscription revenue, the subscription revenue for games continues to be an all-time high and much higher than before the pandemic. And one thing that we've seen that has been quite interesting is that this revenue is not cannibalizing the revenue you also get with IAPs. So a lot of the strategy for games that have adopted subscriptions is to make sure that you're adding value on top of the in-app purchases to ensure you have an extra revenue stream coming in. So focus a little bit on best practices. Indeed, what I'm going to show next is really focused on stories we have heard from developers that are on Play and collection of best practices that we have seen for games that have been able to successfully monetize on the platform. This may seem quite obvious for some of you, so perhaps excuse me if that is the case, but I wanted to make sure that first, before we actually talk about how you can create a good monetization model, that we talk a little bit more about the differences between battle passes and subscriptions, because in some ways they are very similar, and in some ways they are very different. So battle passes are usually a good mechanism to help you boost engagement from players. All we want here is for the player to actually experience your game and play as much as possible during that season. And this is to ensure that the players are earning rewarding by taking actions. Battle passes are available for a season, and rewards are usually based on game engagement, and they can become increasingly more valuable to give an incentive for the player to also continue to play during the season and drive players actually to reach top tiers over that time. They are also based on IAP SKUs, and usually the content is not gated, although you do see some games where they offer tiers of battle passes, one being a free one, and maybe they have a higher tier where it's a paid one. For subscriptions, the aim is to unlock immediate value. Once a user has subscribed, all we're trying to do is to ensure that they understand what they have paid for and see that value. And this is because at the end of the subscription, you really want them to be able to resubscribe or buy a different item. But in this sense, rewards are only available for payers that can buy the subscription at any point in time. And they often usually unlock exclusive content. In both cases, it's also very important to make sure that you're not creating a dynamic that implies that a user is paying to win. So most of the games that we have seen have been successful at using these strategies, ensure that the gameplay is still fair, even if you have paying users that are experiencing the game in an enhanced manner. So when we think about the results we have seen from developers that have adopted particularly battle passes, we see very encouraging results. As we analyze games that have consistently done various seasons of battle passes, we have seen 4 areas where there is a lot of impact on the game's KPIs. First is stickiness. So we've seen that once a player has purchased the pass, they're more likely to return during the season and to make the most of their investment. So they have invested on the pass, they have all the incentives to continue to play during the season. The engagement, therefore, is also a little bit higher than players that have not bought your pass. This is because players who have purchased the pass typically also play more per day than players that have not bought the pass. Conversions are also really increased once passes, because passes are also quite low in value, but they are quite low in cost, sorry, but have high perceived value. They're often very effective at actually converting non-spenders to buyers. And we also have seen that some passes have created really strong incentive for the gamer or the player to actually stay in the game after the season has ended. And this is because you're really creating an emotional attachment with your player when through that season, and creating that urgency for them to do all those quests during that time bound. But then you also can continue to engage them after the season has ended and continue to provide that value. Now, as we think about best practices, it's very important to understand first, what are your goals and metrics? So what are you trying to achieve with your monetization strategy? Again, this may seem quite obvious, but without really understanding the goals you're trying to unlock, is it acquiring new users? Is it engaging existing users? Is it making sure that you're not churning as many users? You're not going to be able to create a monetization strategy that actually helps you to achieve those goals. And a second step is to also understand that a monetization strategy doesn't need to be only thinking about IAPs. We have seen consistently that games that have adopted multiple forms of monetization have been more successful at monetizing different cohorts of users, because they're very capable of then loading value on top of the different offerings that they have. So ideally, you're able to continue to provide your IAP offering as you have today, but you need to think about what you could bundle in form of battle passes or subscriptions, and even perhaps helping you to acquire a different segment of users that you haven't seen or that have not engaged with your game earlier on. This also helps to create a strategy that is flexible. So if at any point in time, one of the subscriptions or IAPs is not working, it's very easy for you to end those cohorts and not keep having to provide that value because maybe it's not appealing to every single player. But also something that's quite scalable. It's very easy for you to then turn and think about what is the goal, what is the metric, how do I change my gameplay dynamic in order to achieve that goal, and then create a monetization model that follows with it. As we think about battle passes, some of the key considerations, and these are just, I'm not going to read this, but these are the primary, I guess, ways of structuring a battle pass that we have seen. But some of the key things that we have seen worked well for games that adopt battle passes are a couple of things. First, create a sense of urgency and ensure that the players understand how much time this season is going to run. And what are the things that you want the player to experience before that season has ended. Remember, for battle passes, it's super key to help the player to actually experience and see the value that they're getting from the game as a way to get them excited so that they can continue to play your game after the season has ended. For games without inherent progression, try to give players something to work towards, quests, for example, or alternatively, you can use passes to unite multiple features you have on your game. And if you're thinking again about adding premium passes, ensure you keep it fair by rewarding players, but not making it easier for a player to win the game. You can use, for example, special items if the user has bought the page track. In that way, it's just something special for them, but it's not necessarily something that makes the play easier. And also, make sure that during that time, you also have enough bonuses to keep it rewarding. So you don't want players to come to the season and then just extract all of the value at the beginning of the season. So you have to keep rewarding them, keeping them engaged for the duration of the season. As we think about subscriptions, It's actually slightly different because the player has already bought the game before they actually, maybe they did play the game for free before, but they have now made already an investment to become a subscriber before you can actually unlock more value. So for subscriptions, we actually have three key points that we've seen consistently that have worked for developers. First one, design for access. So once a gamer has subscribed to your game, make sure that they immediately enjoy some of the benefits. And here I like to think about different industries just to make this quite easy to understand. When you sign up, for example, for a streaming service, you get all of the content from there. You want to help the player or the user to understand what content's out there, how they can enjoy your game, and making sure that they feel good about having subscribed. But that's not enough. If you only did that, you're not going to be able to engage them as they are trying to renew the subscription. The second step is actually create a game loop that can help them to earn something. So these are benefits that are perhaps only available for the subscribers, and they can only be redeemed if the player continues to play your game and continues to engage for the long duration. And lastly, if you only had those two, that would still not be enough because there is only there is only so many engagement loops that you can continue to create. The other aspect that we have seen that has been very successful is also then enhancing this engagement loop with an evolving feature. So over time, the more time a player has continued to subscribe to your game, you can provide something that evolves. So maybe an item that becomes more special and an item that you just are able to unlock when you have played for a particular period of time. And of course, it's always a good idea to have a range of options that can appeal to different players. So with subscriptions, the beauty of it is that you can have multiple different tiers, as well as tiers that are actually catering for a very different type of player. You can bundle different aspects of the game, or you can think about pricing in a different way to ensure that you have multiple ways to engage with different types of players in different cohorts. And similar how you handle IAPs tailoring those offerings to those different types of users can also improve the chances that they are going to actually renew the subscription at the end of the period. So late last year, we actually unveiled a new subscription model on Play. Some of you may have been familiar with it. This is something we announced at I/O last year. And so in our subscription model today, what you sell is separated from how you sell it. And we did this to actually also help to manage the number of different SKUs you need to create in order to be able to offer this flexibility of many different subscription offers. So the subscription itself is the inherent benefit you're trying to provide for the user, all of the metadata for the product that you're selling. But then we added base plans under each subscription, and the base plans define the base price for each supported billing period and type plan. So if you have the same benefit, you can now sell it in different ways. So it can be an annual subscription, perhaps a monthly subscription. And we also added offers that extend the base plan. So maybe if for those offers, for that base price, you also want to make sure that you have maybe 3 periods or try-run periods, or you have different eligibility criteria for different types of players. And this way, it's quite easy for you to also understand what kind of offer and pricing actually is working best for this kind of product. And as I said before, once you start to create subscriptions, it's quite easy actually to scale the sheer number of SKUs you have to manage. Doing it this way helps you to keep the structure quite concentrated, and it's quite easy for you to understand the relationship between the different types of plans you're offering, and also manage complexity that well. So here is an example of a subscription structure. So maybe you have 2 different tiers of a subscription. You have a gold plan and you have a more pricier option as a diamond plan. Now you can have an annual auto-renewing base plan, a monthly auto-renewing, and also a one-month prepaid plan. For prepaid plans, we have seen this be a key component of how to monetize in places where that is a very prevalent form of payment, places like Latin America or Asia. But also the beauty of this model is that you can think about the different ways of offers you can have and how they actually relate between the different plans. So let's say you want to entice a user to move from your monthly plan to an annual auto-renewing subscription, and you can give that with a 20% off for the first year to help convert that user. Once the user has migrated to the annual plan, you also understand that they have already had this offer to start with. So later on, when you're trying to renew them or actually offer another IAP potentially, you also know what this player has already got and also the possibilities of what's to come. You also have an opportunity to try to upsell and win back users. So here, the criteria is yours to define. You can segment in any way you want as well. So changing gear a little bit, I'm going to cover three different, or perhaps four, three different Play Console surfaces that we have today. These are things that I'm very excited about. The first one is about localized pricing. So Ethermax is an international developer founded in Argentina. And last year we ran an EAP with them, and we saw a significant increase in the number of new buyers after testing lowered prices in Brazil and Mexico on their leading trivia game called Trivia Cracked. This increase in buyer conversion drove between 30 and 60% increase in week one buyer conversion from new installs. We have heard from developers that being able to understand localized pricing is one of the easiest ways and perhaps one of the most pressing ways you can actually, just add that extra revenue boost because you're able to tailor to different economic realities and different ways of people, different currencies. And so this is something that we're really excited about. Coming out of that AAP, there were two things that we did. First, last year, we also launched this tool called Strategic Guidance. For those of you that are not familiar, this is the Play Console surface where you can go and to do many different things, but on the monetization side, you can go and configure your SKUs. So you can configure your subscriptions, your in-app purchases, as well as look at financial reports. And we introduced for game developers last year this tool called the Strategic Guidance for Monetization. And so this tool is aimed to help you to understand the different relationships between the metrics that are going to help you to move average revenue per user. With this tool, you can also have a breakdown by country as well as by peer group. So you can select peer benchmarks to understand whether your game or your app are doing better or worse than your peers on the same peer group. And with this metric hierarchy, it becomes very easy for you to also understand the impact of any type of tests that you're doing or things that you're trying to achieve on your strategy. So if you change something on your strategy, you can come back here easily and understand whether that has helped to move the needle in one of the areas or metrics that you have here. We also know that not every developer has a strategic growth consultant available to them, and this is something that we also heard from developers that was a need. So we partner with some of our in-house growth experts to take their knowledge and plug this into this tool. And we wanted to make it easy to contextualize what key metrics are driving your top-line revenue and what is the relationship between the metrics, but also wanted to be able to give written recommendations in the console that can inspire you to take action. So Based on the metrics that you see here, you can also see the strategic report, and there we make some recommendations based on what we have seen have worked for successful developers on our platform. And this is hopefully something that you can also leverage to help with your game. This is perhaps the most exciting tool that we're announcing soon. This is still not available on the console, but it will be available soon. It will be a feature for you to be able to do localized price testing for your in-app products. You don't need to do anything different than the integrations you already have with Play Billing Library. You can come to the Play console, configure different experiments. We actually take all of the load and help you to test those localized pricing. And really, once you have done the testing and we help you to understand whether the experiment is valid, has reached the statistical significance, we're then able to also help you to apply those winning price points and on your SKUs without you having to do any extra work. More on that coming soon, but I wanted to share with this small group today. And then lastly, another feature that we have seen be very successful at helping developers that use subscriptions to prevent churn from users is this tool that's called an in-app messaging. So you can use our in-app messaging API to check with Play when a user opens the app. And then if that user has a declined payment, you are able to show this message and help the user to actually act on it. Basically, they can go to their wallet and actually change the payment method, making sure that they have a valid form of payment before, so that they are actually able to buy your item or subscribe when they are ready, and they don't have to go through the hurdle of when they are on the checkout flow actually doing that. So this is the end of the presentation. Hopefully this was helpful for some of you. Happy to take any calls and any questions, sorry. So thank you for your time. I was so clear, no questions. Okay. Yeah. Can you speak, please, on the microphone? Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question on the experimentation of the Brazil and the Mexico, Argentina, the enhance of the conversion rate. So how do you conduct the experimentation? Because it's like the price is a very sensitive issue that how can you just separate the users into groups to do the experimentation? Yeah.
Went too
Thank
far.
you.
This is coming. So this is a new tool and a new feature that we are introducing as part of the console. So today you already have the ability to set up prices locally on Play, and they can basically be derived from your, say, USD price, or you can set individual prices in in most of the local currencies that we support, or all of the local currencies that we support, which are not all currencies available. But these two will help you to do that. This is still not available today. It's something that we're launching later in the year. So this way, you're going to be able to select which countries you want to actually test your price. There are some boundaries and guardrails in place, so you can tell us basically what your goal is, what you're trying to achieve, how do you think about your pricing, so you do have some control of how we're testing the price. But this is the tool that will be able to help you to get there. Thank you. Any more questions? Well, I'll be here for a few minutes, so if you want to come and meet, happy to. Thanks, everyone.